The minute it looks like they're not going to hold on to power, you will see the full division of the Democratic Party, and now you see it. And the denial parts of the Democratic Party that I still see are that they think they have a Biden problem. No, they have a brand problem. There is not another human being that's going to do any better than Biden, for sure. And even if there was, they do not have a mechanism in the historical record of elections to just move him off the stage.
President Biden's old age is now apparent to everyone, and serious doubts are being made from within his party about whether or not he is fit to serve as president and if he can win against Donald Trump in November. With just 4 months to go, there are calls within his party for him to step aside, but looks like they've got themselves in a bind. I don't think that they can pull it out, but to help us, I've brought Troy Olson, author of The Emerging Populist Majority, great book, Sergeant of Arms at the New York Young Republican Club, and legislative director for the New York City Council. So at this point, the Democrats are stuck with Biden.
Not only are they stuck with Biden if he doesn't want to go, but they don't know how to actually move in someone else. Their alternative to Biden is Harris. And there's a lot of Democrats that understand that Harris is not only not any better, but she's probably a few points behind. And I think once you ramped up a full campaign against Harris and played some of those awful, speaking on record, I think it would get worse.
I think that the thing that we're all discovering, when I say we, I suppose the left and the media, is that their candidate cannot do a traditional campaign. The more he gets out in front of crowds, the more he's engaging with audiences, the more evident it is that he is just not there.
Well, that brings us back to our start. How did we get here? In 2020, Joe Biden did not have to do a real campaign. COVID gave him the excuse to not have to run a real campaign. Mm-hmm. They spent $8 billion on that campaign, a record-shattering amount. Obviously, that went to a lot of TV and God knows what else, but the actual campaign events that we associate with traditional presidential campaignings, you didn't see him out there. He hid in his basement. Joe Biden was their candidate in 2020. COVID happened. Joe Biden did not have to run a traditional campaign that we're accustomed to seeing.
So you're saying, which is my view, that Biden had impairments back in 2020.
Yeah, he was not the same man he was in 2016 or 2008 or 1998. And I think anyone who watches it year by year can kind of see that steady decline. It's been gradual, it's been steady, it's been, very observational.
I mean, you can just go look up any clip of Joe Biden from his days as a senator,
yep.
And even as vice president. It's a different. He's a different man.
And they'll try to bring it up. Look at Trump. Watch him. No, I'll pull up a video of Donald Trump. He generally sounds like the same person he's always been. Mm-hmm. He's always sort of spoken how he's spoken, and you either like him or you don't. But his style and his manner of speaking is not. There's no decline there.
Why is it suddenly we find ourselves in this situation where just like before the debate, the Democrat Party was lockstep with their candidate, and then suddenly it's like they've had cold water poured on themselves, and they've woken up from a fever dream, and they realize, holy crap, our candidate is not only really bad for the party, he's a liability for the country.
Yeah, I think they had to face the music after the debate.
Yeah.
I think more than we look at knew the truth, but just kept up the facade for years, really. But the debate exposed to such a wide audience that this is impossible to ignore. And
how were they able to ignore it for so long? Did they really believe their own propaganda, or was this a conspiracy to cover up his impairments?
It's the royal court's job to protect the king, to protect the regime. I've long said that the media in this country and some of the institutions function more like a royal court and a clerisy. in medieval times than like the institutions that we would associate with the United States of America as a constitutional republic.
These
royal
people
court.
all depend on
Yeah.
Biden maintaining his office.
Pomp and circumstance. Biden gives the administrative state their authority to do what they do. The administrative state is the real, especially by the progressive ideology in this country of its various incarnations, that's the real government, is the administration, but you need a name in front of the administration. The Biden administration, which is a continuation of the Obama administration, and it's an acceleration, which was a continuation of, well, really you go all the way back to the beginning with Woodrow Wilson, who first sort of articulated this sort of scientific administration of government. And
all right, for people that wouldn't know that, what does Woodrow Wilson have to do with this?
Woodrow Wilson was the first political science professor president, and his view of the Constitution was that it limits the effectiveness of the American national government. So we need to build up an administrative capacity that goes beyond the shackles of the Constitution, if you will. So he saw the Constitution as a hindrance and a burden to the country moving forward, to progress, if you will. Mm-hmm. And his shadow has lasted a long time. He wasn't that successful in his own time, but his legacy and his vision is the vision that we've been living under ever since.
So you would say that Woodrow Wilson's perhaps one of the most consequential presidents?
Absolutely. And his shadow, it stretches 100 years. I don't think it stretches a year longer, though. I think we're at the end of that story.
The argument goes from an academic perspective is that the Constitution and the founders didn't see all the great things that government can do, and that the government, for all these social programs and extra functions that these people want to have the government, are impossible to do if you're really being a strict constitutionalist. The government can't have all this extra administrative power, and so they're sidestepping it. So what would a true constitutional system look like then?
A constitutional system would interpret the Constitution and govern in more of a negative liberty sense. It's things the government cannot do. These are rights that belong to the people or to the states, respectively, which is the 10th Amendment. And it would be a lot less about what government's going to do for you. It's more about what it's not going to do to you, mm-hmm. would be kind of the original interpretation. And it's not that government would not do some things for you, but that's not its main point. Its main point is to protect the country, to protect the integrity of the national sovereignty, and to not infringe upon natural liberties.
Well, I feel like that's where we find ourselves, is that the government has taken on all these extra roles, and it's failing to do its most basic function, which is to keep the country secure and to maintain to be a good steward.
Yep.
I mean, it's spending money like a drunken sailor.
Yep.
They have an open border. We have the basics aren't even covered. So why would we even expect it to do all this extra stuff?
For a long time, there just hasn't been enough love and respect for the do no harm principle. If you get in there and you're a leader that just does no harm, that would actually be a pretty great leader these days. And we just don't have enough reverence and respect for it. We have built a presidency around the idea of like an FDR figure, but that's a terrible way to run a system that originally had, I think, a pretty workable system. And so we need to probably, what do they say a lot? Return to tradition. We need to return to tradition if we're going to ever return to actual normalcy.
So does that imply a much more lean government? So pre-Wilson, we had a much smaller executive office.
Yeah, and I realize that you're not going to be able to do that totally overnight. That'll take a while, but it's where we're going. And whether we go there fast and chaotically or kind of slow and gradually, we'll see. I think some crises in the future will sort of force our hand. So even if we want to slow walk it to there, I think some crises in the future will sort of just make it faster and more chaotic.
I think a lot of people don't realize what we had before this Wilsonian administrative state, where we still had roads and bridges and infrastructure, and people were still getting educated. Yep. Medical treatment was it wasn't as advanced, but it was far more accessible. They had visit you at home doctors.
Yep, and even the successes of that post-Wilson era, I would attribute to the original core of the country being very solid. Our victories in World War II. Mm-hmm. We had a tough time in the 30s, Great Depression, but we had a unified American culture.
Yeah, and I was just to finish off my point. We didn't have the IRS or the Federal Reserve Bank, and the country had grown and prospered just fine.
Yep.
And then we create this extra administrative state. Then we have the New Deal, and it just keeps on piling and piling and growing. It's like the blob, right?
Oh, and the real catastrophic one, I think, has been everything LBJ did, the Great Society.
Yeah, the Great Society.
I'm talking about like Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
In terms of like our budget, Great Society programs add up to more than the New Deal programs do. And, LBJ had a really catastrophic foreign policy too. And I think it's telling that today's progressives, actually out of all the past presidents that they put on a pedestal, they put LBJ right next to FDR, which says something about what they really believe and think. It really is about just the accumulation of more power, especially done through the central government.
The thread of Wilson.
Wilson, yeah.
And what does that mean today, and how is it relevant to Biden?
Tie it right to today.
Yeah, it has to be about.
So my way of doing that was his shadow lasts 100 years. I don't think it lasts another year after.
I like that line.
We're at about 100 years now.
Okay.
Like it's the end of the road. I think I got to tie it back to the original point, which is
the deep state just needs a face.
The Democrats don't have a Biden problem; they have a brand problem. And the thing that they stand with is the deep state. It is the administrative state, and the administrative state needs the Democratic Party because that's who supports them. So they're in this. It's not unlike the Democrats' relationship with the black community. They're sort of like mutually dependent on one another. Democrats can't win enough elections anywhere. They don't get like 70, well, more than 70, 85, 90 historically % with the black vote. If it gets less, they're screwed.
So they have an unworkable coalition.
They have an unworkable coalition that is made up of government bureaucrats and dependents. And they're all mutually dependent on one another now. And they have like this layer of professional class voters, and that's probably who we think of when we think of the modern Democratic coalition because they're so loud and prevalent. But for every one professional class voter, there's 3 or 4 working class voters. So the working class voters that they lost, I mean, it's 4 to 1. They're doing some bad trades.
So the Democrat Party is a coalition of these
urban professionals, dependents, government bureaucrats. Yeah, government bureaucrats, independents, and urban professionals.
Why are they together? Why are they lumped together? What does the urban professional have to do with welfare dependents?
Well, who's going to? Well, the government bureaucrat's going to administrate the various programs, so that those are tied together. The professional may be in that area, but maybe they're in the corporate world. Maybe they're in the nonprofit world, which is basically ran like the corporate world, except it gets, taxpayer dollars, whereas the corporate world is going to be, largely the finance wing of very rich people, it's not that the professional class votes as heavily. It's within the margins. It's significant because the professional class, which is probably 5% back then, 3, 4, 5%, scientists, all those people, they were heavily Republican under Eisenhower. And today they are probably not as heavily Democratic, but much more Democratic. And that switch started in 1972. The only coalitional group that George McGovern in his 49-state landslide lost, the only coalition group he did better with was professional class voters. And I think normally when we say professional class, we're especially talking about academia.
Okay. We see the Republican Party that has been totally changed by Trump, and then this Democratic Party that is locked in with these dueling coalitions and the administrative state. how did they end up in this situation where it seems like suddenly, just in the course of a few days, their whole coalition is unraveling?
Well, the unraveling is something I've been saying would happen as soon as they knew they would not hold on to power. There's this idea, I think, coming from the right that Democrats just march in a line. If you look at Congress, that looks true. It certainly feels true day to day. But the reality is for years now, the Democratic Party has been like 3 or 4 parties within one. And what unites them is power. And so the minute you think you're going to lose that
like
power...
mutual distrust and disgust for the Republicans in the middle of the country.
Yeah, basically. Because the middle of the country doesn't have anyone that's on their team, or for various reasons. And also, Democrats really turn on their former voters. When you leave their party, they hate you. You're the biggest villain, traitor imaginable if you once were a Democrat. And so, it's a matter of... It's unraveling because they are now seeing that they're maybe past the denial stage and anger, and
they have a leadership crisis.
Now they're into bargaining.
How did they get to have a crisis like this in leadership, where their candidate is just too old?
Yeah, if you look back to the 2020 primary before COVID, if you can think to that couple month period.
Well, why couldn't they have gone with like a Bloomberg, or if that Bernie was popular in their race?
Bernie was unacceptable to the donor class. Biden ended up being the choice because he was in the moderate lane, and it appeared as if he could beat Trump. And in retrospect, I think Biden's probably the only candidate from the 2020 field that could have beaten Trump. He still needed COVID and a whole lot of other stuff to do it. But if you run through, if Liz Warren was the nominee in 2020, she would have lost. I think Pete Buttigieg was the 2020 nominee. I think he would have lost. Bernie Sanders, I think, would have lost too, because Bernie Sanders has proven to be not just a standard Democrat, but a bit of a fake populist. And the optic of our time is real versus fake. And I think people dislike when you're insincere and turn out to be inauthentic. And a lot of Bernie's coalition really did turn out to be sort of just a junior version of what the Democrats already had, a professional class coalition. Bernie's voters were very much sort of aspiring professional class people. They weren't quite there. They were recently graduated, so they were younger. They had a bunch of student debt, so they care about that issue, wanted Medicare for all. They wanted basically a large social safety net beyond which we've ever had.
Very optimistic, progressive, naive.
Yep, very much. And I think a lot of those voters are actually Trump voters now. And I think
that's a huge thing. Yeah, I was a Bernie bro.
I think a whole other slice of them is maybe third party or looking at Kennedy. I think if Bernie ran today, hypothetically, I don't think he would do nearly as well.
Well, he's lost his luster.
Look at his rally with AOC and
It was weird. Well, he wasn't even on the news. AOC was the one that took
there was 70 people
all
there.
the news. Yeah,
it's like 70 people there.
Bernie barely got mentioned.
Half of it was media.
He was there with Jamal Bowman and AOC.
Yeah,
and he was not even mentioned in most of the press reports.
And the reality is, if you think the squad is out there, Bernie's more responsible for the squad existing than anyone else.
How is he the grandfather of the squad?
Well, he went in and endorsed all of those candidates in the primary, and vice versa. AOC backed Bernie, and all the squad backed Bernie in the 2020 primary. That primary only resolved itself because COVID happened, and they needed to rally into a line because it was all about beating Trump. And Biden gets 5th in Iowa. I don't think he does much better in New Hampshire. Pete Buttigieg wins those 2 states, but Pete Buttigieg can't get any support in the most solid Democratic constituencies, the black community. He's got no support there and was seen as problematic there. So Biden, Obama's VP, becomes the natural choice. He's the last moderate lane, non-Bernie candidate that can do it. And I guess Bloomberg's out there, but Bloomberg was not finishing high enough.
Yeah, he spent
to do it.
$1 billion and got.
And he's a billionaire. That was that problem.
Yeah,
he was a billionaire. So you're going to totally alienate the Bernie people. They needed to kind of step over Bernie and make sure he wasn't the nominee, but they needed to do it in a way that didn't totally alienate his supporters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how we ended up here. COVID and Biden stayed in his basement that whole cycle. Had we not had COVID, Biden wouldn't have even been the nominee. And even if he was the nominee, it would have been exposed during the 2020 campaign that he doesn't have the mental and physical stamina to do a real traditional campaign.
Because we see it. The more he's out in front of the cameras, the more he's interacting with people. He just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
It's a hard job. You got to be hitting the road every day and being president.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is just something that he's too old for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the stages of grief that the Democrat Party is going through. We've seen this since Thursday of the debate, that they've been going through all of their scenarios, trying to cope. Was the first stage is denial?
Denial. I think I heard that when I was at the Braver Angels conference in
tell us about it. You watched the debate at this bipartisan talk shop conference where the left and the right get together and try to talk.
Braver Angels National Convention. So within Braver Angels, there are more blues than reds, but they did a good job for the conference. They made sure that for every blue, there has to be a red. So it was totally 50-50. And, we went and very much represented the populist reds. But what was great was to see in real time the blues shift from denial at first to anger to, I think they're now in some mix of anger and maybe more so lean bargaining.
And depression.
Bargaining depression stages now.
What was the room like?
Well, the denial anecdote I have is somebody brought up Nixon Kennedy, TV versus radio in 1960, and said, if you read the transcript, it doesn't look so bad. He was talking about reading the transcript of the debate that he was.
Right.
This was like this 70-year-old liberal Dem, basically, or 65 years old or whatever. And so to me, that group of Dems actually, I think, is the most sort of locked into MSNBC, CNN. I actually think they're in the biggest bubble. I know probably within our generation, we tend to think it's the sort of loony progressive left. In my experience, it's actually sort of the boomer liberals who sort of have always assumed that America was going their way their entire lives. And, so...
Well, don't you think that's interesting that people that are progressive in America, they are in a giant bubble because all the institutions, the schools, the entertainment, corporate America caters to their values, panders to their values.
Yep.
If you're a MAGA conservative, you are challenged every single day.
Yep.
There's nowhere that you're going where people are trying to pander to you.
Not
just so for them to be totally taken by surprise at how bad their candidate is when he gets on stage with Trump, that's their own fault.
This is why I'm glad we're not in a bubble and can't even possibly be in a bubble. When we have a bubble, we're creating a little space somewhere perhaps, but the progressives are fully in a bubble, and I think the minute they won the culture for good was the beginning of the end for them, because they don't actually know their opponents, and they don't know what's going on, and they can't perceive reality the same way, or they think reality is just totally what they think. I think these are all disadvantages, and even though it's hard to not just have your ideals and principles questioned every day, but even sometimes your humanity questioned by these people and institutions, by being an mega populist Republican. I think in the long run it builds a lot of character. It sharpens the ideas. It keeps you on your toes, and the last thing we'll win back is the culture. It'll probably take 40, 50 years. The last thing they got was the culture. Democrats would be in a much better position if they didn't have this sort of cultural hegemony, because they would then be able to, because the cultural thing has really woken up the last portion of America that was sort of bargaining with the left a little bit, the portion of the right that was sort of bargaining and sort of in this.
Why don't you explain that further?
Well, like this, what's that? I think the best anecdote for it is actually William F. Buckley, kind of what's the job of the conservative? And he said to stand athwart history yelling stop. And the reality is much of the conservatives of the last many years were just for driving the speed limit. You know, we'll play it fair, play by the rules. We'll drive the speed limit, and then the left just started going 100, and then they started doing it in a Prius. So,
well, yeah, they're not going to. I think that they are reaching the end of their road.
Yeah, it feels that
as
way.
we're beginning to get over the hill, and we're seeing the end, the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party as we know it.
I think so.
We're seeing the beginning of the end of a lot of this cultural hegemony. I think that the pinnacle of the left would have been Obama's presidency, and from the Obama presidency. Maybe through, that was the clear high water mark.
Yeah.
And then maybe the big bounce back during like COVID, Summer of Love, where they were really influencing everyone to mask up, to participate in the George Floyd riots, to like that was the overwhelming narrative. You couldn't escape it no matter where you went.
It was
this
almost.
overwhelming flood of all of their favorite issues: the race issue, the gay issue, the state control through the virus, and the victory lap that they were doing when they defeated Trump.
Yeah,
I think that they reached another high. It never would plateau to the point reach that point that they were under Obama, but they had this victory lap phase as well.
Well, and I think even the midterms kept that lap going a little bit. They thought we all thought the midterms would go worse for the Democrats. I'm one that thought it more or less, it was a midterm where Democrats still lost. So I don't but the fact that they felt they won, I was okay with that. I think it gave them a false sense of security. Because think about this, had they truly been spanked like 2010, 2014 in that midterm, I think they maybe entertained swapping Biden out in the primary. Like everything they're talking about now, it's too late. They don't have any idea that's going to be any better than just
let's get back. Yeah, let's get back to the biggest issue of the day. What are their options with Joe Biden?
Well, so the ballot deadline is passed in 2 states. There's a third state, Georgia, that it's about to pass, and those are 2 states, I think, Wisconsin and Nevada. So those are states that might control the electoral college, the margin, and so that you have that practical problem there, and you have another problem of the money that the one advantage, not advantage anymore, but Biden has a 190 million cash on hand, right? Okay, so that's comparable to where Trump's at, and Harris can get that because she's part of the committee. It's Biden-Harris, as a ticket. Harris could get that money, but this hypothetical, let's parachute in Gavin Newsom or someone, Gavin Newsom would be starting over with $0. So, and that's not even talking about the actual political quagmire.
Well, all of this none of that can even happen without Biden saying, okay, I'm going to step aside. And we're at this point, we watched the ABC interview. It basically it looks like an intervention with Grandpa saying, we got to give up the driver's license.
Yep, you're too old, Grandpa, to drive a car.
And he's making up all these, or bringing up all these things that are maybe true, maybe not true, but he's in denial. He does not believe that. And then on top of that analogy, in the real sphere, we have all those people that surround him that are totally dependent on him keeping that position for their own interest.
Oh, yeah. I think you're talking about even people...
His family.
Joe Biden, Hunter Biden.
Jill Biden, Hunter, the cabinet, Blinken, Lloyd Austin. These people need him to stay there to keep their positions.
AG, Garland, I think if Biden doesn't elect on his own accord to go, this is a fake story. It's not going to happen. I view it as a pressure campaign more than anything. But
are they going to... I think that the Democrat Party and the state apparatus that it depends on, I think that they will try something. I don't think that they're going to just let Joe Biden spoil this for them, even though they've kind of spoiled it for themselves already by gaslighting everybody and waiting this long to see that their candidate really is declining. But do you think that they might try to force him out in another way? Maybe have a real intense intervention, maybe a 25th Amendment? What do you think?
That means that Harris is the candidate. Mm-hmm. So the same people need to ask themselves, do they think Harris can somehow win, whereas Biden couldn't? And most of the data we've seen, other than one or two polls, has Harris a few points behind Biden. I still am of the belief that Joe Biden is your best chance if you're a Democrat.
Joe Biden is still the Democrat Party's best chance to beat Trump.
Yes. Yes. He was in 2020. He still is in 24. Everybody else that's mentioned, it's purely hypothetical. They haven't been polled or tested a lot or vetted a lot. And also, good luck getting them in there. Because think about this. You're going to go into the convention. Let's say you want to get Gavin Newsom in there, even though I think he's very overrated. You're going to parachute this guy in and step over the first black female vice president. And
Black Asian
female vice president. And your most reliable voting base is black women in terms of percentages. I mean, I think that they can't do that. They're not going to do that. It violates the MO of what drives the Democratic Party today, which is intersectionality. And why do they like intersectionality? Because it's purely cultural. Okay, the Democratic Party will run to the left as fast as possible for anything social and cultural, but they won't economically or for foreign policy. That's the bargain they've made. That's a bad electoral bargain. It's always been a bad electoral bargain because the country, if anything, leans a little bit right on the cultural, social issues, and then leans a little bit left on the economic issues, and is sick of endless wars too. Mm-hmm. The Democratic Party has a brand problem because they are on the less popular side of almost all the issues now.
Well, why don't you say that again? What's the problem with the Democrat Party right now?
The Democratic Party talks as if they have a Biden problem in the media and in their leadership, but the truth is they have a brand problem. The brand of the Democratic Party as the party of the people has been totally shattered and lost. Only the biggest hack still believes that. They have traded working class voters for professional class voters. That's a bad trade. They have traded, every trade they've made the last 20, 30 years that they thought would pay off has been trading fewer numbers and exiting larger numbers.
So are we seeing the beginning of the end of the Democrat Party?
I think so. I really do.
The Republican Party went through their crisis over the past 8 years with Trump. He took over the party and shattered the Bush dynasty, swept aside what we would call the neocons, and now they're locked in behind Trump for the most part.
Yep.
And so the Republican Civil War is over, and the MAGA populists have won. Now, what are we seeing with the Democrats?
Well, and I ask you, who are those populists? What is their age? They're a lot younger.
Oh, young.
So you know, even after Trump, where this is going. The Democrats also have a youth brigade too, and they're like progressives. But even amongst the youth that are Dems, it's a lot more varied than people think. There's a lot more, people going through what some people that realigned went through. What I went through 8, 9, 10 years ago, I know people that worked in Democratic campaigns that are going through versions of that right now. Does that mean they jump ship and realign and become a populist Republican tomorrow like I did? Maybe not, but they might at least check out, become independent, indifferent, disengaged. The truth of the matter is I don't know who salvages this Democratic Party because their zeitgeist really is this sort of Gen Z progressive who thinks there's 50 genders and 51 tomorrow.
Well, it sounds like that by the nature of the way it is behaving, the Democrat ideology is on the road to extinction. It's an extinctionist ideology with the climate fanaticism. They've created a religious structure that is extinctionist.
Yeah.
They have the end of the world is coming, and one way or the other with it, whether or not it's if Trump gets back in power, if we all die from global warming, For them, it was COVID for a while
Well,
until that blew over, and they aren't pursuing lifestyles that are conducive to creating happy, healthy families.
Yeah, I'll just go through some family demographics. Republicans are still having 2.1 children, which is the ideal rate for the future. So Republicans are still doing what we need to do as a country. Democrats are down to 1 kid. You play that out over the next 40 years, and that's going to add up. And you're not going to be able to. You can try to import illegals, but the timeline to get them to vote, become citizens, register to vote. I just, if that's really their plan, and I get that Republicans will often say that that's their plan, and it is their plan, but that's not a very good plan at all, because I personally think cheating takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And the more you have to cheat, the more the work is. It's so much easier to just genuinely reach and persuade someone on the damn issues.
Yeah, and then there's all the second and third order consequences of cheating and trying to game the system that you may have never thought of. And I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, totally.
All of their little house of cards is like all at once in the past 9 days starting to crumble.
We hid Biden in the basement, and we can do it again.
We lied to our voters.
We can do it again because he'll have incumbency. Oh, no, we can't. He can't do the basic performative.
Well, look at that. They've lied to their voters over and over again.
Yeah.
Biden, a huge part of his campaign was student debt forgiveness.
Yeah.
Almost diddly squat of that has happened.
Yeah.
Huge part of his campaign is this Green New Deal that they want to run. They've spent billions of dollars on that, and they've installed 6 EV charging stations.
Yeah, and that was basically the infrastructure bill.
The incentives. The automobile only Tesla is making a profit on selling EVs. All of the other automakers are losing money on EVs. We can go down the list. These so-called job numbers that he has are a lot of them are part-time jobs. 2/3 of them are going to foreign people that were not born in the United States.
Elsewhere,
And these are, and also I think a huge percentage are government jobs. They're not really true productive jobs for the economy. Oh yeah, and let's not even forget 2 new wars. Forever wars.
The reality is the world is on fire, and Biden has performed terribly, and you can spin that, I guess, for a while if you're a huge partisan blue, but putting him up on stage in what we witnessed last week made even the biggest hack just have to face the music. And so now you're seeing the fallout, and you're seeing what I've been saying to you and many people for a while. And part of me was so assured in saying that because I had been a former Democrat, and I saw how many different parties the party actually was. And my type of Democrat is extinct. So I had to go somewhere else. Even if I wanted to still be a Democrat, I don't. It would be just a pointless waste of my life and time. You'd be better off just never voting again. So you're seeing what I was hinting at there, which is that these folks don't agree with one another.
What are the different groups within the Democrat Party, and how are they drifting apart?
So let's start newer to older. The newer group that has been emerging has been the professional class, which heavily is defined in the media by college-educated degree voters. That's not a very large constituency at the end of the day, but it dominates the conversation. It sets the agenda. And that part of the Democratic Party is all in on the cultural progressivism. They're fine with that, but they're maybe a lot less likely to give an inch in other places. The part before that is going older. Let's go to the realigned, I'll call it actually the Rainbow Coalition. I'll call it that because it's the coalition in the 80s. And that was Hispanics and Asians. As that population was growing in America, they were heavily Democratic. Mm-hmm. So that's peeling off. That middle portion of the coalition. So the first ones, I think, lockstep there, maybe peels off in the margins. But the newest coalition is usually the most stable one because they're new arrivals, unless it was truly a transactional, strategic, temporary vote. The middle is, I see, Hispanics and Asians peeling off quite a bit, the Rainbow Coalition. But who formed the core of that Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Coalition, the black community, they realigned under FDR in 32, and they did it on like a 70-30 level from their prior Republican voting since Lincoln. And they did it over economic opportunity. The country was mired in 25% unemployment. So it was over economics, which is, I think, largely what the black community is realigning over today. I think they're realigning to Trump over economics first, like working class economics, and Trump is a better economy than Biden's economy for the black community and for everybody.
Anyone.
For everybody. And that's obvious, and they're feeling that. So that, I think the same way they realigned in 32 on economics, same way it's happening today. And the question is does it get to like the 70-30? I don't know, but I think the oldest one is realigning within the margins of the black community. You're seeing sort of the middle portion of it that was growing in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, Hispanic and Asian vote is realigning probably, especially with the Hispanic community, even faster. The only portion that is stable is the newest arrivals, which is like the professional class coalition that started their realignment maybe 50 years ago, but it really sped it up under the Clinton and Obama years. They are probably sticking with it, but it's also a much smaller coalition than you think. It seems like it's bigger because it dominates.
Well, it seems
the
like a lot of
but
the young coalition of the party, I feel, is that they feel most betrayed. It seems like that they're the ones that are least prepared for a Trump victory, and that they're going to have a panic attack. That they've been, lied to about student loan forgiveness. Mm-hmm. They've been lied to about the economy. They've been lied to about affordability. They've been lied to about the Israel-Palestine war. They've been lied to on so many fronts, and they put so much emotional of energy into this success of the Biden presidency, and now it's all just unraveling. We're reaching the end of the presidency, and people really don't know what they can say for it. And I think it's telling that they're saying in the White House and in the fake news, oh, this is one of the most successful presidencies in modern history. And they keep on saying that over and over again. But if you go talk to somebody on the street, anybody, there's no way that they would say anything nice about it.
It's weird because on paper, they pass these multi-trillion-dollar bills, but I guarantee you, no one knows the name of them. Compare that to the legislation of the New Deal or even the Great Society. People know and have a relationship with what Medicare is, with what Social Security is. They don't have anything like that. I don't even think the ACA is like that. It's a little bit more like that. But Biden's infrastructure bill, his American Rescue Plan Act, no one's going to know anything about this in 50 years. But they are going to remember about Donald Trump saying he was going to build a wall and then winning a second term and doing it. And they're going to remember the successes of his first term immigration policies and then the second term, and then what was in between. We have a unique choice, and I think this has awakened a lot of Americans. Normally, you do not have two administrations and a set of outcomes side by side like this. You just never get this choice. It's always, well, I'm going to do this, and they're going to do that, and it's always hypothetical, and you kind of got to do a little bit of guesswork.
I have a little bit of a leap of faith, but
we don't have any of that. We know exactly what we're going to get. So I think that the realignment you're seeing is a natural byproduct of the differences in those outcomes, and I don't see this race reverting to the supposed closer race that it was supposed to be.